Live stream where we will be talking about the lumber collapse that is continuing. We are trading, lumber futures are now trading at a 1-year low. This is much different from what it is that people had suspected taking place just a few months ago, really, when you had the credible threat of tariffs that were so prominent through the mainstream media, delivering a message of elevated lumber prices going to cause home prices to go up by $10,000 or some obnoxious number, only to find that quite the opposite is happening, very much like I had predicted. I didn't think for a second that lumber tariffs were going to cause prices to explode like everybody else seemed to think, and many people on the mainstream media had predicted, and kind of, to their own demise, in my opinion, a lot of companies had started raising their prices based on the idea of the credible threat of tariffs that were going to be happening on lumber and causing lumber prices to increase. So, when we look at the reality of the situation, what is happening? Lumber futures are now trading at a 1-year low, the lowest that they have been in a year. Not going up in price, going down. Even with the tariffs, even with the idea of what it is that's happening out there with the trade between the United States and Canada and all the other stuff, all the elevated inflation expectations has not manifested itself in lumber. Quite the opposite. Deflationary pressures are taking place within the lumber industry. And now I have been reporting on it consistently over the last year. Mill curtailments, inventory depletions, shutdowns, this is still taking place within the industry, and it's not going to get any better. If you have $515 per thousand on the lumber futures price, these mills are not looking to produce. They are going to curtail even more going into the future. Not only have the announcements been stated that they are shutting down production and permanent shutdowns of production within the lumber industry from British Columbia all the way down into the United States, including many parts of the southern part of the United States, which was booming with lumber industry for the last, few years. Everybody is facing the consequences that is now taking place, and this is a sign of the times. It's not just the lumber industry and their mismanagement of forestry, their forestry developments and stuff like that. No, this has a lot more to do with the demand coming from home builders looking for buyers within the home market, right? Within the real estate market. Without those buyers, the home builders are not excited, and if those home builders are not excited, there is no demand for lumber that is going to get the mills up in operation again. This is a very devastating situation. I don't know how many people really have internalized it as that, but if you had a situation in which that you did have better economic times, the ability to provide enough lumber into a system that has an increase in demand is going to be very low. The prices will explode. I do not see that happening here, but the situation is definitely setting itself up. To understand how bad of a situation that really is to understand that this is like COVID, only very different. Right? Like, many people looked at the COVID pandemic and the shutdowns of the mills as the problem. Unfortunately for those people who had been focused on that, they misunderstood that there was a huge issue taking place throughout 2019. Many mills were shutting down production, shutting down operations, pulling back on inventory. There was very, very little inside of the system at the time. Prices had dropped dramatically. Do you see now, like, how this is kind of set up almost in the same fashion? We have mill curtailments, inventory depletions, and shutdowns, and we have a price that has fallen dramatically. All right? Give it some time. If you see any kind of turnaround, think about what would happen if all of a sudden the credible threat of tariffs was alleviated. Like, would that not spark some good economic times? Think about what would happen if you had a situation in which that the interest rates became so available for the people out there that they started going out there and borrowing money again. Like, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying, what if? Now, if those things are not going to take place, what is going to take place is less demand. And if you have less demand, you're going to have less production. And if you have less production, you are going to set yourself up for a very devastating situation, because it's not like lumber can just fire right back up. You have to have the loggers to cut the trees, to haul them to the mill. Then you have to saw them up, and you have to distribute those things out there into the system. All that takes time. And if you devastate that situation with lesser logging operations that are available, lesser mill operations that are available, the ability to then fire up production again becomes very diminished. Like, how do you do that? You can't. You literally cannot do it. See, most people don't seem to understand that there is a limited amount of production that is even possible when it comes to the production of kiln-dried lumber. To know that kiln-dried lumber has a certain amount of space and time that is needed in order to dry that lumber. It needs to go into a building, and then it needs to sit in that building at an extreme temperature to get the moisture out of the wood. That is not something that can just ramp up production into. It has a limited capacity. There's only so much room and so much time. And unless you fire up more kilns, build more kilns, there's only so much production that can be had. It's very limited. When that demand exceeds the availability and the production, the prices will explode. So just look for that moment. When you see the home buyer sentiment in builders turn positive, and it's not even the buyer sentiment, it's buyer traffic. It's a particular sentiment, right? It's a particular view coming from the builders. When you see that buyer traffic turn positive, and it doesn't even really necessarily have to turn positive, I think once it starts moving towards the positive direction, once it starts moving in that positive direction, you're going to see the lumber prices moving up, and moving up dramatically. Right? Like, I've been sharing this information for so long, many people have just come to the idea that I am just repeating myself over and over again, trying to, I don't know, scare the people or something, but that is not the situation. Right? I am very much in a position in which that I can see this so differently than most people out there, including those who are working at the mills, those who are logging, those who or even in the distribution network of it. Unless you are looking at all angles simultaneously, this becomes a very, very obscured market that most people will then just take a tariff threat as the reason, because they can't really fathom anything else. Yeah. I mean, let's go back and think about some of the stories that were being told. When these tariffs, these duties on Canadian lumber, you're going to see it explode. It costs $10,000 to to increase on the price of a house. Completely, like, I don't know where these people were coming up with this. They were just making it up. Literally just making it up. You can go back now and listen to all those people. You can thank all those people for completely delivering you the incorrect information, because here it is. The evidence is now clear that the price of lumber is plummeting, not going up. We have 4 days left before this contract closes. In fact, it's not even 4 days, it's 3 days, right? Because it closes on Friday. Do you think that it's going to explode over the next few days? Or do you think there's probably going to be some more continuation of this demise within the lumber demand? Probably going to continue down. At $5.15 per thousand, mills are not excited. Anything under $5.50 and they're like, man, this sucks. There's some mills out there I'm sure will make money. Others are going to shut down production just like they are doing. They're like, if we can't make money, why operate? Right? Like, I mean, would you show up for work if you know that you weren't going to profit from it? Probably not. These guys are the same way. If they can't profit from it, then they're done. They'll shut down production and call it good. If lumber prices move back up, well, then maybe they can fire up their mill again. But even that is going to take a while before they're able to produce and put into production a significant amount of material. Okay? Now, granted, the United States is really good at ramping up production, but the more that you push the loggers out of business, the more you push these mills out of business, the more you destroy the distribution network, the harder it is to reestablish. Okay? Like, we were able to quickly reestablish the supply chain right after COVID. It took a bit, the equilibrium, from oversupply to undersupply, but it was found. Okay? And now here it is, pushing down on that industry again. It's going to make it very difficult to ramp up supply if the available manufacturers now are going out of business. All right.
Dan, I have that stain for you.
All right. Dan's going to go get the stain. All right. Please creatively misspell words the algo frowns on. Yes, please do. Energy drinks are doing well. Okay. What you think of gold to copper ratio? I really couldn't. I would have to like kind of think about that to give you a good answer on it. But to be honest with you, when I look at copper, I think about it as being pretty much an industrial metal, 100%, and gold as an investment metal for the most 100%. Now, of course, gold does have industrious use to it, and copper does have investment use to it, or at least qualities to it. But for the most part, those two are not really doing the same things within the economy, right? One's an industrial metal, the other one's an investment grade store of wealth kind of thing. All right, I'm surprised people the forgot he was a con man born with a golden spoon. All right, have you looked into baby boomers selling, passing their houses down to their kids in the next decades, and if that might affect the home builders and the mills, decrease in population, less homes needed? Um, well, okay, I would agree with that in the sense that yes, there are more like the big baby boomer population dying off and then leaving their homes to the next generation. And since there was this huge baby boomer population, they would be leaving it to like leaving more houses available than the demand, like exceeding the demand out there, something of that nature, like this silver tsunami of homes that are coming from people dying off or just, just giving up living in those houses. This is the thing that I kind of think about is like, is the population shrinking? It's not. The population isn't growing as fast as it should, but it is growing, right? And it's more people now than there was during the baby boomers, like the population of the United States, right? So as this is growing, unless you are meeting the supply, like unless the supply of homes is meeting that population growth, even if it is diminished, it's still not going to keep up. And that's the situation we are now facing. And I understand that for a lot of people out there, they're like, oh no, man, you don't understand. There's a billion homes out there for everybody to live in. Okay, that's not necessarily the case. And we have to understand that it's not just a matter of one house per person or per family or something like that. It's the matter of the property owners and their concentration of wealth. And that's really what has taken place now. So the concentration of property owners is really the signs of the times due to the fact that we have ever increasing amounts of new money that pours into the system. This is more of understanding the Cantillon effect than it is as like current economic conditions. There's nothing that you can really do to stop this. So you really have to understand that if I am going to compete against what it is that's happening out there, you have to think I need to become a property owner in one way or the other, because the concentration of properties is now going into the hands of a few. This is going to make it ever increasingly more difficult on the average everyday person to try and get into that property. Anyway, when it comes to like the amount of baby boomers leaving those homes, I still think that's not going to provide any kind of significant increase in inventory. What that will do is essentially leave this house to their kids who are maybe already living in the house or needing a house to live in. One way or the other, that property is probably not going to come up for sale in the sense of like a mass inventory boom, right? Like, I don't see it happening that way. Like, those houses are already spoken for, essentially. I believe 80% of the population cannot qualify for a loan for the homes prices nowadays. 40 years of wage stagflation sucks. Yes, deplorable. You're absolutely right. Obviously, the plan is to import more people to make a shortfall and maintain buyer demand. However, the size of home and energy demand is not matched for today's energy costs. Huh. This is why I think they will pass the 50-year mortgage, and more power to them. Do you think they know lumber will? Do you think they know lumber will skyrocket at some point when the builders ramp up again, and that will keep the housing prices high? All to keep asset prices high? No. I mean, well, I don't honestly think that right now they are shooting themselves in the stomach with, with the idea that they can keep elevated. Like, would you do that for the government? Would you do that for the housing? Would you do that for the rich? Like just totally just slash your own profits and your own capabilities and everything else? Like the lumber mills are not part of the government. They're not part of the banking system. All right? As much as people want to believe that, they are not. All right? These are individual independent companies. Some of them are huge. West Fraser, Interfor, Canfor, Warehouse, or some of these names are just massive. But that's not the only ones. You ever hear of Frank, Sierra Pacific? What am I looking at there? Western Forest Products. These people are huge. Have you ever heard of them? Maybe not, right? But they produce a lot of lumber. Now, think about some of the smaller mills that are out there that nobody has ever even heard of. Like I see sometimes lumber come into my yard with the lumber wrap on it, and I'm thinking, man, I have never heard of this company before, but they're up in Washington. They're not even that far away. Right? Do you think all these people, all these mills, all these guys are going to get together and say, yeah, let's keep the housing market elevated, while we just totally kill our profits? No, of course not. Those people want to profit just as much as everybody else does, and they're not going to get in some conspiratorial game to keep interest rates or keep real estate elevated so that the rich can stay rich. That doesn't make any sense. Eh? Every one of these companies out there wants to profit, and if they can sell their lumber, they're going to sell it. Period. They're not going to hold back production, shoot themselves in the stomach, say, oh man, I guess we're going to shut down production and just not have a job anymore so that we can keep the rich being rich. I mean, no, that's not the way it works. And as much as people want to believe that, go ahead. I mean, I'm not going to try and defend your understanding of the conspiratorial mindset. I know I used to be there a long time ago, and I very much probably would have jumped on board with the idea that they're doing it to cause pain and suffering to the people, because I believe that. And it actually was the truth, because that's what ended up happening to me. But once I recognize what it is that's truly happening out here, and it comes down to supply and demand, and it really comes down to a profiting situation in which that you wouldn't want to work if you weren't profiting, right? If it doesn't sell for a price in which that you can make money at, then you're going to say like, I'm out. Is that too hard to understand? Like it shouldn't be. I mean, that seems pretty reasonable to me. That if you're not going to make a profit, then you wouldn't want to work. And that's the situation they now face. So if they were in a position in which that they were trying to manipulate anything, it's literally just to try and get the lumber prices up to the point that they can profit again. They don't want to not mill. Like that doesn't make any sense. Builders don't want to not build. Home lenders don't want to not lend. Like none of these people don't want to not do something. They want to do something. They want to do the transaction. They want to do the production. They want to put the thing together. That's what they want to do, because unless they are doing that, they're not profiting. And, to think, well, maybe if we just hold back and cause some pain and suffering to the people as a coordinated effort, knowing that you are literally going to be cutting yourself off from being able to profit, and then may even be so devastating that you can't return back to the game, I don't think that that's something that they are doing. All right? Now, other people can believe it. Go for it. I'm in this game. I see it from a lot of different angles. That's not one of them. That used to be one of them, but not anymore. And here's the thing, like, there's no way I would have been able to call out the lumber market as accurately as I do if I took on any other view than the ones that I do. Right? Like I don't think about it as a manipulation game. The only manipulation that's in it is lumber production saying, listen, we are not profiting at this price. I'm done. If that's a manipulating game to say, hey, we are not producing until inventory falls and the price goes up and then we'll start producing again, if that's manipulation, then think about yourself for just a minute and whether or not you're going to continue to get paid even though you, or continue to work even though you're not getting paid. Would you do that? Does that make sense to you? Of course not, but yet you want the corporations to do it. Huh, that seems weird. Like I don't expect the corporations to do that. I expect them to profit and continue to profit if they want to stay in business, because that's how it works. All right, let's do 1,000 a year and pay $5 a month for rent. All right. Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. Let's do 100-year mortgages. Japanese have long-term mortgages, but they were the first to regrow the economy using debt and central planning. And it didn't seem to really work out for them very well. Have you ever noticed that? Like, I mean, they do okay in the sense that, like, they have an economy that is working, but they suffer like a deflationary battle. Like, they could not find inflation, constantly in a disinflationary situation. And, to think like that's some sort of success, I mean, I guess in a way that it continues onward, like it didn't, like it hasn't failed, so that if it doesn't fail it must be successful. All right, this country will be gone in 50 years. I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. All right, they're giving away money to anybody who will actually go out and work for it. Plywood, aluminum, and metal break. What else do you need? Some paint? Huh. The money is manipulated. Yeah, but that's fiat currency to begin with. Like, I mean, you think about it in a sense, like if you were to say, hey, let me write you this IOU and then I'm going to hand it to you and then you're going to hand me something that's real. Like, that's a manipulation, right? Like, I don't have anything, but I promise I'll pay you in the future. I promise. And then when the future comes, if I don't deliver well, I'll promise something else. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just break my promise. Right? But that's a manipulation game in itself. Unless you are trading real goods and services for other real goods and services, then it's a manipulation game. And it doesn't matter if it's the money or just a promise, like your own promise to pay into the future. It's the same thing. Yeah. Low birth rates in Japan, and we are all copying. It's not a copy, it's a situation in which that the elevated standard of living doesn't give you the opportunity to have kids. And I know that sounds weird. It sounds actually counterintuitive, because you would think the elevated standard of living would give you the ability to have more kids, right? Because the more money you have, the more you can spend on your kids. But the problem that most people end up facing and trying to understand the human nature of this is that Cantillon really explains it very well. In that if you have an elevated standard of living, kids are going to lessen that standard of living because kids are expensive, right? So the more kids you have, the more it puts pressure down on your standard of living. And so therefore, the more kids you have, the lesser standard of living you actually end up with, because kids are expensive. Now, if you have already a low standard of living, like you're living in poverty, you can have as many kids as you want. It doesn't lessen your standard of living. Right? Because like anything lesser than poverty is like death. So you can have as many kids as you want. It doesn't really lessen you in any way, shape, or form. In fact, if anything, maybe some of those kids might be successful and elevate you up from the lesser standard that you're at. And this is very, very counter to what most people would think when it comes to populations and what it is that's happening within advanced nations as opposed to poverty-stricken nations. And that's really the case. And this is something that Cantillon described from way back in the day. So you can really look at it as economics and not like, social conditions or education or advancements in birth controls and stuff like that. That's not the case. Like, I mean, that has a lot to do with it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not trying to dismiss those things, but the underlying case is an economic force due to an elevated standard of living and not wanting to lesser that standard of living by having kids, right? What time is it? Do I have to go yet? All right, I got a few more minutes here. We can keep going. What is it? 24 minutes into this live stream. Do we want to keep talking lumber? What other questions we got? This country will be gone in 50 years is gonna capsize like the island of Guam. Look at Africa, lots of kids and poor as F. Yeah. Well, and that's, and it's easy to understand it from that. Let me see. Maybe I can even bring it up here. Maybe um let me see if I got it somewhere in Cantillon's essay here, if I can bring it up. Um, so let me see. It's what chapter is it? I think it's in chapter 2. Let's see. The increase for the subject cause increase of population. Maybe it wasn't. Okay, the increase and decrease of the number of people in a state chiefly depends on the taste, fashions, and ways and the lifestyles of the property owners. Let's see. Let's go and read some of that there. Page 85. Let's go check that out. God, my computer, it is so weird. Sometimes it just bounces everywhere, and I don't understand why it does. It's just like, all right, populations, growth due to the tastes and the desires of the property owners. That's kind of weird to think. Like, it's the rich people who really determine this. And, a lot of times people don't want to believe that, but I think really when you think about it in that sense, it really does make a lot of logic behind it, in the sense that if you have a property owner increasing luxurious experiences, that makes it more difficult to have that standard of living that is in a way that can have more kids. Like, if the property owners raise the cost of living, then having a regular standard job like we do makes it very difficult to have kids inside of that. Right? So it's the wants, desires, and the needs of the property owners. All right, the increase and decrease of the number of people in a state chiefly depends on the tastes and the fashions and the ways and the life of the property owners. Population is based on the taste and choices of property owners. Early versions of the Malthusian approach to population growth, that it follows some mathematical formula, are criticized. This chapter also shows that the opulence and lavish spending of the prince and absentee landlords living far from their lands was responsible for the poverty and declining population of France, which ultimately led to the French Revolution. So here in this chapter, Cantillon breaks down what it is that's taken place that has actually created a situation that raises or lowers the population, and it's due to the property owners and how it is that they are conducting themselves, which again just seems so odd for a lot of people to try and rationalize and think about. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can find this spot that I was looking for. Sorry, guys, I don't mean to leave you with a bunch of dead air here. I usually just kind of babble through, but I was trying to find this spot and I should highlight this so I make it easier. Okay, here we go. The increase of population can be carried furthest in countries where the people are content to live the most poorly and to consume the least production of the soil. In countries where all peasants and laborers are accustomed to eating meat and drink wine, beer, etc., not many inhabitants can be supported, and that's the case, right? If you enjoy eating meat, drinking beer, drinking the wine, having the nice stuff, not a lot of inhabitants can be supported in that situation. But if you are in a population in which that the people are content to live the most poorly and consume very little of what it is that's being produced out there, then you can have a lot of kids inside of that. Right? Very different. Most people don't see it this way. Once you do, everything starts to make sense. And then, just like the gentleman was saying earlier, how, all these poor nations in Africa have a lot of kids, right? Same thing. If you are content to live poorly and consume very little of the land, then you can have a lot of kids because it doesn't lessen your standard of living. But if you're wanting to eat meat, eat meat, drink beer and wine and have a good time and all that other stuff, then not many inhabitants can be supported because you're consuming all the stuff, right? You have that higher standard of living. All right, 2K stimmy should pump lumber up. Won't happen. Don't I love how the idea of a 2K stimmy or this dividend check or whatever it is that's coming from the tariffs that may not even be legal. Like, talk about a hypothetical based on a possibility of something that may not even be legal. I understand the more they push that out there, the more that people are going to use that as a wealth effect, thinking, oh man, I got this $2,000 coming, so I can feel a lot better about spending my money. And then it alleviates some of the pressure on the consumer, and then they go out there and they just start, spending their money again with the idea that there's this possible dividend check coming into the future. But there is no proof of that happening yet, right? And the idea of even taking it in is totally lending into the credible threat theory, right? Because you haven't gotten your check yet, but a lot of people are communicating. I had this guy give me a really long comment, give me all this stuff about the dividend check and what it means and how it's coming and what it's going to do and all this other stuff. And at the very end of it, I'm like, man, that is a fantastic imagination for a hypothetical situation. Because it hasn't happened yet. It's like alleviating student loan debt. How many people believed that was going to be the case? Did it happen for everybody? No, it happened for a couple, some people, right? But the fact is that it's still there for most people, and it never got alleviated, right? Now, factor in crime within dark economic times. Y'all would show up every day for a sign that said free beer tomorrow. Oh, yeah, huh? Wouldn't you? If there was a sign out there somewhere that says, hey, show up here for free beer tomorrow, that credible threat would have plenty of people motivated to show up. You're right, man. You're totally right. And then on top of it, if you thought that you were getting beer tomorrow and you had beer today, and you were trying to save your beer for tomorrow, but you thought that there was going to be free beer tomorrow, you would just drink your beer today knowing that you had beer coming tomorrow, right? I know I would. I would drink the beer anyway, even if I didn't think I had it coming tomorrow. All right. Nothing comes free of charge. We should start EBT back to what it was originally for. We should also make it where if one has another kid while on welfare with no intention to seek a job stability, she'll have it revoked. Well, Heather, I like the determination and the forcement of taking responsibility, but ultimately what you are doing is you are setting it up for those kids to starve. So that's not a good idea, right? The whole point of it was so that the kids can eat. And then if there's more kids and they don't eat, and it's their parents' fault, which is already their fault, so we're going to blame the parents and then punish the kids. That's ultimately what that means, right? I'm not trying to defend anything by any means. I'm just trying to, I guess play devil's advocate on the argument of it. All right. You could give most poor people a free house tomorrow. I doubt it. They would sell it the day after and spend it all on luxuries within 6 months and be broke, holding their hands out for free stuff again. Yeah, I guess that would be the case if you're just trying to talk in a hypothetical situation. But that would really ultimately end up no matter what, right? Not necessarily the move into luxuries and blow it all and stuff like that, but the concentration of wealth would essentially happen anyway, even if you were to equally distribute everybody with an equal proportion of everything that is wealth out there, right? Equal land, equal money, equal everything. What you will immediately find is a concentration start to happen, because what's going to take place is that even if you had a plot of land, right? And you said, okay, everybody right now, as we sit, equal distribution, everybody has an equal amount, right? One of those people are going to have kids. One of them's not. The one who has kids has to divide his wealth up amongst his kids, where the other one has the entire wealth to themselves. So if you assume, say, like an acre of property, they have an acre that one individual does, but then if somebody has 5 kids, they got to split their acre up amongst 5 different people. So now their proportion of property is now much diminished because this person decided that they weren't going to have kids and this person decided that they were. So now immediately the distribution of wealth, which was equally proportioned, has immediately now become disproportioned. This person has now elevated themselves with a higher property value amongst themselves because they have that one whole acre. Well, this one now has to divide it up against his 5 kids, right? So now they only hold a little piece of an acre. This is wealth inequality that has now taken place. You can't stop it. You can't stop it, even if you were to start off with equal distribution immediately. As soon as somebody took any kind of action, there would be immediately disproportion of wealth and in concentration and inequality, right? So it's just the way it goes. You know, you can't force that situation to exist where it's equally proportioned for everybody. It doesn't work like that. Right? And anybody who thinks that it does is like living a delusional system in which that you will constantly be forcing yourself to try and achieve that, and it will be a constant fight and battle to get there. Right? What time is it? Alrighty, guys, I got to go. It was great hanging out with you for the half an hour talking about lumber. We got 228 people watching. I love it, with 73 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. Take the next 2 minutes to go reach over, hit that thumbs up button. By hitting that thumbs up button, the YouTube algorithm is going to grab this video, spread it around for more people to join in. We can continue this conversation after the video gets uploaded, and really talking about and understanding the current situation that is happening within lumber, I think is going to be very telling of the broader economy. And by focusing in on lumber, we can really understand when the shifts are taking place, because once that demand picks up, we are going to know that there has been a rolling over in this economy, and that the demand for homes, or at least the buyer traffic increasing, is going to show that the economic activity is starting to present itself again. Now, whether or not that's going to be like a booming economy or just a slow grinding forward, at least it's given us some sort of understanding of what it is that's happening out there. And I think by looking at lumber and focusing in on lumber, there is really no better commodity or resource or industry out there that is going to be as telling as lumber is. So keep hitting that like button. We got 82 likes. Let's get it up to 100 before we end the live stream. All right, take care, guys and gals. Well, thank you, the Bullet Traders, for being here. Jeff says, Chris, every country is in more or less doing the same thing. The reset the system would cause pain and anarchy, so we all agree just to pretend it's okay. Yeah, and you know, that's something that's very interesting. You're right about that. Every country is in more or less doing the same thing, and I totally agree. Like, it's pretty amazing how they all had this coordinated effort that worked in lockstep with each other right when the COVID pandemic picked up. Very interesting how many nations out there were sitting with very low neutral interest rate, which was interfering with their monetary policies in order to stimulate their economies by the adjustment of interest rates. All of them seem to have raised the neutral interest rate. Right? All of them kind of did the same thing that the Federal Reserve was needing. Very interesting. It worked out very swimmingly for all these central banks out there. Kind of like how they're all getting into the digital currencies too at the same time. Very interesting on that. Alrighty, guys, we got 10 more likes. Hit that like button. We're almost done with this live stream. We literally got like 2 minutes left before I got to go back to work. All right, is it higher for longer for the foreseeable future? I think the Fed is going to stay high, has gotten high, and is going to stay high for a significant amount of time going into the future. The idea of lowering interest rates is not in the cards. They lower interest rates to create and establish and maintain the credible threat. But ultimately, they're trying to get the Fed funds rate to neutral, or get the neutral interest rate to the Fed funds rate, however they can do it. Credible threat of tariffs and persistent credible threats of tariffs going into the future will continue to raise the neutral interest rate, although we hear a different argument coming from Myron, the newest Fed official to the FOMC, who is saying quite the opposite. Time will tell. We will find out more when we have the tariff impact, whether or not the Supreme Court decides that it's legal or not. Game 2, there is so much to take in as far as what could continue to keep the credible threat of tariffs going, keep that supply chain broken, keep the idea of inflation moving up and what it is that's happening with labor. There are so many different components into this. It makes it very difficult to understand. But if you just focus in on that neutral interest rate, what it is where that may be and what the relation to the Fed funds rate is at this moment. Like, is it getting closer or is it further away? Because every time that inflation expectation rises, it moves that neutral interest rate closer to the Fed funds rate, which makes it less restricted. But if the neutral interest rate is falling, like Myron seems to think, and the Fed is taking interest rates down, it's not accommodating the economy anymore. It's following the restriction down, making it just as restrictive or not any less restricted because they had lowered rates. That is what we really need to look at. That's very different from what a lot of economists are talking out there, but I really don't care what the other economists are talking out there. They got it all wrong because they never listened to the Federal Reserve and their monetary policy that they were trying to deliver to the other central bankers out there, like we did here on this channel by reading through hundreds of speeches delivered by the Federal Reserve that describe this situation perfectly. Uneducated Economist. 4 more likes, guys. 195 people, 4 more likes. Let's hit that before we end this live stream. We're almost there. I'm almost late for work, guys. You got to hit the like button right now. All right. What does higher for longer mean for gold? Well, I think really most people are probably going to look at the higher for longer as a very restrictive economy and most likely think of that as an inflationary pressure that is being built into the economy, or at least into the perception of what's taking place in the economy. And therefore, if there's that elevated inflation expectation or belief that it's persistent, then the safe haven asset is gold, right? So it should be somewhat beneficial to gold. All right, 105 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. I really appreciate you all for being here, supporting the Uneducated Economist, hitting that like button, commenting, and then coming back and hitting the like button again and commenting some more, because that's the best way to support the Uneducated Economist. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.